Welcome back, focused learners. I am so pumped to have you here for today's explainer because, well, we're taking on something truly massive, uncovering the very origins of Islamic jurisprudence. We're tracking the life, the brilliant mind, and the absolute enduring legacy of Imam al-Shafi'i. This is a man whose intellectual odyssey literally shaped how over 1 billion people live their daily lives today. We're going to trace his footsteps from some seriously humble beginnings all the way to his lasting impact as an absolute master of legal scholarship. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just imagine trying to build a legal framework for an entire civilization from scratch. Actually, scratch that. Not from scratch, but out of total fragmented chaos. Because back in the 8th century, the Islamic world was exploding. It was expanding rapidly, absorbing all these new cultures and traditions. And with all that growth came a massive clash of legal doctrines. Everyone had their own different method for deriving laws. So framing Imam al-Shafi'i's life as just a simple biography, it really does him a disservice. This is an epic quest to bring structured, logical order to a massively fragmented legal system. But you know what? This grand intellectual journey, it starts with some incredibly humble beginnings. Born in Gaza in 767 CE, which, by the way, is the exact same year the great Abu Hanifa passed away, al-Shafi'i actually lost his father when he was just a baby. His mother really wanted to preserve his connection to the Quraysh tribe, so she moved him to Mecca when he was barely 2 years old. And they lived in extreme poverty. We're talking about a penniless boy who couldn't even afford paper. So what did he do? He'd wander around collecting discarded shoulder bones just to write down his lessons. It's just a stunning contrast, right? This immense physical vulnerability paired with sheer unstoppable brilliance. And man, that brilliance showed up shockingly early. By the time he was just 10 years old. 10. He had completely memorized Imam Malik's massive legal text, the Muwatta. Think about that for a second. Imam Malik spent 40 years writing and revising that book, and this young kid just held the entire thing in his head. And this was right after he'd already completely memorized the Quran at age 7. His capacity to retain information was just unparalleled.
But here's the thing. A photographic memory isn't quite enough to build an entire legal framework, right? You need tools. And al-Shafi'i knew he needed the ultimate tool, total mastery of the Arabic language. He realized early on that truly understanding the core Islamic texts, the Quran and the Hadith, required an impossibly deep grasp of linguistics. So he leaves the city, he heads out into the desert and embeds himself with the Bedouin Hudayl tribe, who were famous for speaking the absolute purest classical Arabic. He spent years out there mastering not just the vocabulary, but the poetry, the weight of the expressions, the real nuances of the tongue. This desert immersion, it basically gave him a lifelong edge over almost every other scholar of his time. So he ends up becoming one of the most well-traveled scholars of his era. His life is basically mapped across 5 distinct cities. He was born in Gaza, raised in Mecca, apprenticed in Medina, tested in Baghdad, and finally reached his ultimate evolution in Egypt. And every single one of these physical locations profoundly shaped his intellectual growth. He wasn't just reading about different cultures in a library, he was living them. He was breathing the unique scholarly atmosphere of every major hub in the Muslim world. Naturally, his journey takes him to Medina next, the city of the Prophet. And he goes straight to the biggest name in the Muslim world, Imam Malik. Remember, al-Shafi'i already had his entire book memorized. Obviously impressed by his sheer brilliance, Malik takes him on. So al-Shafi'i spends 9 years apprenticing under Imam Malik in Medina. 9 years just absorbing the traditionalist approach directly from the master. He stayed right by his side, deeply internalizing exactly why the practice and traditions of Medina mattered so much, right up until Imam Malik passed away. Fast forward a bit after Malik's death, and al-Shafi'i's reputation is really starting to grow. He even gets offered a government post as a judge in Yemen. He takes it, but there's a catch. Al-Shafi'i was strictly, unbendingly honest. He did not care how rich or powerful you were. Justice was justice. And naturally, that strict honesty really angered the powerful elites in Yemen. So, to get rid of him, they concoct this vicious lie, totally framing him, accusing him of supporting a rebellion against the state. The situation escalates terrifyingly fast. He's arrested, thrown into heavy chains, and dragged all the way to Baghdad to face the Caliph Harun al-Rashid. Picture this. He is standing before the Caliph, literally in chains. His life is on the line. I mean, other people accused alongside him that day were executed. But al-Shafi'i uses that incredible eloquence, that pure desert Arabic, to calmly defend his loyalty. And then, this incredibly dramatic intervention happens.
The chief judge of Baghdad, a famous Hanafi scholar named al-Shaybani, speaks up for him. He tells the Caliph, "This man is a scholar, not a rebel." The Caliph is so blown away by al-Shafi's intellect that he just drops the charges. This terrifying ordeal saved his life, sure, but more importantly, it permanently shifted his trajectory away from politics and straight back into pure scholarship. Now, what is absolutely fascinating is the intellectual gold mine al-Shafi'i suddenly finds himself sitting in. He decides to stay in Baghdad and actually study under the very man who saved his life, al-Shaybani. Do you realize what that means? Al-Shafi'i now possessed something literally no one else had. He knew the Maliki way, deeply rooted in the traditions of Medina, and now he was mastering the Hanafi way, which was rooted in the logical reasoning of the Iraqi jurists. By studying under both schools from the inside, he had this totally unique vantage point. He could clearly see the incredible strengths of both methodologies, but he could also see their gaps and their inconsistencies. So it hit him. This is the crucial point. He realizes the legal chaos of his era wasn't happening because people lacked knowledge. It was happening because they lacked a system. Nobody had actually written down the rules for how to make the rules. So what does he do? He founds an entirely new science, Usul al-Fiqh. This translates to the roots of Islamic law. It's a systematic, logical methodology for deriving legal rulings directly from evidence. He wanted to take jurisprudence totally away from speculation and guesswork and replace it with a rock-solid logical framework that everybody could follow. And the physical result of all that work? His magnum opus, a book called al-Risala. It translates to the epistle or the message, but honestly, it is effectively the ultimate rulebook for Islamic jurisprudence. It's the grand synthesis of his entire life's work. Before al-Risala, scholars had all these varied, scattered approaches. They were kind of all over the place. But after al-Risala, the science of Usul of Fiqh was officially born, and the entire Islamic legal world was permanently changed. Inside al-Risala, he brilliantly laid out a crystal-clear legal hierarchy. Step 1 is always the Quran. Step 2 is the Sunnah, the teachings and practices of the Prophet. And listen, this was a massive deal, because al-Shafi'i strictly insisted that authentic hadith carried equal legal weight to the Quran, which ended a huge, ongoing debate of his time. Step 3 is ijma, or the consensus of the scholars. And finally, step 4, which is only to be used as a last resort when absolutely nothing else covers the situation, is qiyas, or logical analogy. It was clean, it was perfectly structured, and it worked. But wait, his journey wasn't quite over. In 814 CE, he makes his final major move. He leaves Baghdad and settles down in Egypt. Now, Egypt had its own distinct scholarly tradition, a completely different cultural environment. For al-Shafi'i, this wasn't just a change of scenery. This was the ultimate test of his life's work. He took in the new context, the new evidence, the totally new scholarly atmosphere of Egypt, and he turned his own rigorous methodology back onto his own previous rulings. What happens next is just a staggering display of rare intellectual humility. When he was presented with new context and stronger evidence in Egypt, he didn't just stubbornly dig his heels in and cling to his past work. No, he openly reevaluated and revised his earlier positions. Today, scholars literally refer to his teachings from Iraq as the old school and his revisions in Egypt as the new school. Think about how incredibly rare it is for a massive public figure, a master scholar, to openly revise their life's work. But for al-Shafi'i, the absolute pursuit of truth was always, always more important than his own ego. Honestly, you literally cannot overstate his monumental legacy. He was the ultimate synthesizer. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, another absolute giant in Islamic history and actually a student of a Shafi'i, summed it up perfectly. He said, "Not one scholar picked up a pen to write about Islamic law except he owed a huge debt to al-Shafi'i. He built a framework straight out of the chaos. He bridged the gap between tradition and reason, and it's a framework that is still actively governing the daily lives of over 1 billion people around the world today." As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought. Beyond the brilliant legal frameworks and the historical milestones, al-Shafi'i's life teaches us a profoundly important lesson in intellectual honesty. This was a man who possessed the courage to constantly learn, to synthesize opposing views, and most importantly, to change his mind when the evidence demanded it. So, what would our world look like today if we possessed that same willingness to completely revise our most deeply held beliefs in the pursuit of truth? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. I hope this leaves you hungry to explore even more of this fascinating history. See you next time.